This is an acoustic guitar which I bought from JB Hi-Fi. JB Hi-Fi is a sort of a electronics shop, I guess, and this is their own brand. It's called, you can see the headstock here, it's called Tribute, that's the brand. This one was a TRI 1CE, if you're interested. It was 222 Australian dollars when I bought it about 4 years ago, and it's not a very good guitar. I ended up, after a year of cutting my fingers to ribbons with this because the strings are terrible, I bought a Taylor Academy, which was a lot better. But I never actually did a setup on this guitar because I didn't really know what I was doing back then. So I'm going to give this to my niece now. So I've decided I want to do a setup on it. I'm going to try and lower the action a little bit at this end, although the action's not too bad. I think it's mainly the strings that are terrible. And we might even try and lower the action at this end a little bit. And this is really a setup anybody should do on any guitar they buy that's new. You really should do a setup on it because you could buy a guitar that costs twice as much as this, or 10 times as much as this easily, and still not be playable really for a beginner because the setup's terrible. A lot of expensive guitars have terrible setups because they expect that you're going to set it up. So I'm going to knock out the nut here. No, I need the sunlight. I'm going to knock out the nut and I'm going to shave a bit off the bottom. So all the strings are a little bit too high. So rather than just use a file in each groove and file a little bit out to get it lower, I'm actually going to take the whole nut out and sand a bit off the bottom. So I'll show you doing that. The easiest way to work out your action height is you basically fret the guitar at the first fret, like that. And you see how far you have to push it down, and then while you're holding it down there, you see how far you have to push down the fret at the second fret. So the amount of height you have here now, at this second fret, whilst you're holding it down at the first fret, the amount of height you have there is the same amount of height you need at the first fret. So if the second fret is the same height as the first fret with all the strings released, then you don't have to touch it. And if you go lower, you might get some buzzing. But if you can press it down, and it's less movement there than it is here, which it is, then I can go down. Now I've checked all the strings and they're all a little bit high. That's why I'm going to knock out the nut and do them all at the same time. So just going to loosen the strings off now and, oops, it's tightening. Or is it? No, it's tightening. Loosen the strings off. I'm not going to take them off yet because I want to test the height once I've done it. So I'm just going to loosen them off so I can easily knock the nut out. Should be able to just tap this on one side. This is a very blunt old screwdriver. So just get a little hammer, light hammer. I'm just going to tap it out. Alright, so because it's a cheap guitar, they've glued it in really hard. That would be a sin on an expensive guitar, to glue it in that hard. You would, in fact, I would complain to the manufacturer if they glued it in that hard. But, since it's a cheapo, I guess we can't complain too much. And there it goes. Alright. And look at that. The nut itself is actually hollow. Plastic nut. I haven't seen a hollow one before. Alright, so it took a little bit of timber because I can see where they put a whole line of glue in there, which is ridiculous. In theory, you don't really even need any glue at all. You just put a tiny dot on so that you can easily knock it out if you need to adjust it or put a new one in. But you know, you can see the glue's gone right up here and right along here. That's how much glue they use. That's quite bad. So I've just cleaned the slot up a little bit, and you can probably see here too, this bit of the fretboard here, it's actually sticking up. So they've sawn that. They haven't cleaned up the edge and just stuck it straight in. Yeah. So I might just hit that with the sandpaper now like this. Just smooth that up a little bit. There's a bit of sandpaper on this block. That's all it took. So, you know, you buy a cheap guitar, you can't expect expensive or detailed finishing. So now I'm just using this little sanding block I've got here. Just going to sand this end a little bit to get the glue off. Okay, so it's got the glue off there. Now you can still see, even here, you can see a little bulge there with the glue sticking at the bottom. So I'll just give that a little bit of a sand to get that off, and then we'll actually... So I've just got myself a blue texture. And I'm just going to, like, just go on the edge here, like this. And then we'll just sand it. Alright, so we're just going to pop that in. Like that. Put the strings on. So, I had a complete failure. I shaved down the nut, sanded it, and went too far. It is now the case, as you will hear, yes, they're all resting on the first fret. So I went way too low. I've basically got a 0 fret here now. I'm going to make a new nut. I'm going to make it out of wood. This is just some spotted gum. Spotted gum I think is pretty good. It's heavier timber than, say, American hardwood maple. It's about a bit more than 20% heavier, and it's cross-grained, so it's fairly strong. It won't sort of snap easily. So I'm going to use that, and we'll make a nut. So basically all I'm going to do is cut a piece off round about that size. So I'm leaving plenty of extra room on top because we need it to be bigger, of course. This is sort of approximate, but so if I cut that little bit out there, should be alright. I don't know if you can see the pencil mark on there. Hopefully you can. Yeah, I think you can. I'm not putting in a device because you won't be able to see it very well on the camera, so what could possibly go wrong by me doing this by hand? You can probably hear how hard this timber is. What I'm going to do now though is get this piece and sand it closer to thickness. I've got these, if you get a pair of these are good if you're baking nuts. I got these are quite expensive in all of these sort of vice grips, but I got them on special at my local hardware store. I think they wanted to stop selling them or something, and I picked these up on the cheap, so I was very lucky. But the good thing about them for sanding is you can just sort of clamp them like that and put them on a sanding machine, just hold down, sand it, and you don't have to worry about dropping it or losing it or taking ends off your fingers. So I'll be using that. I'm going to put the slots in the top, then I'm just going to keep cutting them down until I get the strings the right height. Once the strings are the right height, I'm going to shave the top off, and so I've just got a small amount of string impression there, rather than trying to shave the bottom. It's much easier to do it that way. So we'll just get approximate now, and anyway, you'll see. I tried to fit it in here, and on this side it's fine. Oops, this side it's fine, but on this side, which you'll hopefully be able to see when I pull the strings back, there's a gap there. So it's not quite fitting in. It's almost a perfect fit. I'm not going to bother sanding the whole of this flat bit. It does, this side does fit in perfect fit. This side's just a tiny bit too big. I'm going to actually just shave the end off this little bit here. I'm not going to use power tools anymore though, because we're getting too close now and the chance of overshooting is pretty high. So I'm just going to use like a bit of 240 grit here. We'll just make sure we're talking about the right end. It's that end we want to get mainly. So we'll just give that a little bit of a sand, that edge off. And might as well sand the whole thing a little bit with 240 anyway, give it a bit of a polish up. I don't know if you can see it, there's just a little crack there now, it's almost in. So I'll just do that a little bit more, and once I've got that fitted, we'll come back. Alright, I only took a tiny bit more sanding, it now fits in perfectly. So I'm not going to worry about sanding it more yet. When we're finished, I'll sand it to sort of polish it up a little bit. But for now, that's fine, fits in fine. I'm just going to line this other nut up, get a pencil, and just mark the existing string locations. Now my nut is actually slightly narrower than this one, so you don't have to be like micrometer perfect or anything. That said, you don't want to be rough as bags either. Okay, so I've got those marked in now, I'm just going to saw them in. I'm getting old and my eyes have seen better days. You like what I did there? You see what I did? I did it again. Alright, so we want to angle our fret slots towards the keys so that they drop down towards the keys. Actually, I think I find it easier to do it this way. You could, if you wanted to, cut these with a sharp knife first so that your saw has somewhere to grip. Just so you know, these markings are not evenly spaced on a nut. Because the strings are different thicknesses, you can't space them evenly or they actually are uneven. Yeah, try and work that out. So the spaces between each string are different. They are not the same space between each string. Don't make that mistake. Easy one to make if you're not thinking about it. We've just cut very narrow slots. I've put the strings back on just to check the spacings look right, and they do look good. You can just check by eye. It's the best way to do it. Don't worry about measuring. Check by eye. If it looks good by eye, it'll be fine, because measuring you can actually, I find it much harder to do than just doing it by eye. So that looks good as far as that goes. We could tighten them up now and have a look, but I haven't really deepened these slots. So that string fits in, that string fits in, this one not quite. So I need to widen these 4 slots before we go and actually check the string height. So I'm using these little files here. I got them on from Alibaba. Not Alibaba. What's it called? It's a Chinese one that does instruments anyway. They're terrible. They're really hard to use. They're not very good files at all, but they cost about $2. To get one file for doing one string thickness, if you get a proper file, it's about $50, $60 per file. Yeah, I don't want to spend that much, so I just persevere with these guys and I'll buy another set if I need them. Buy 10 sets, it's still cheaper. They've got different thicknesses for different strings, obviously. So we'll just work on our thicker string, which is going to be over here. And we'll just widen it out like that. It's just a matter of, you know, filing it down like this. It takes a while because they're crappy. If I was, you know, making a lot of guitars and I was making money out of the guitars, then time is money, and I would buy some decent files. So I've widened those out now with using different sizes of files for different strings, of course, and we'll test fit it now. I tuned the guitar up. It might be slightly out now because the strings have just been loosened, tightened up again, but it seems pretty in tune. All the strings are a fair bit higher than I'd like them to be, except for the G. The G is perfect. Like, I can't even feel, it doesn't even feel like I have to press it down to fret the first fret. It just feels like it's already on the fret. At first I thought it was going to be really bad, but it's not buzzing at all, and it really just feels like I don't have to, hardly even have to touch it, and it's perfect. So that string is perfect. The others are all too high. The E string definitely has to go a fair bit more, and the other strings as well. So we'll take it out again, do a bit more filing. So I've been filing away and thinking to myself, gee, it's dark, I can hardly see what I'm doing, it's quite overcast out here. And I really need to rig up some lights. Then I remembered, I already had, so I just plugged them in and turned them on. So I don't know what strings were on the guitar. Like I say, normally they ship with 1253 is normal. These are 1152, so the thinnest string is 11, the thickest string is 52. So 52 is pretty close to standard string. So this is kind of like a, they call it a custom light. It's pretty, not that thin, just the thinner string's a bit thinner. So we'll see how it tunes up with those. I've taken the chance to clean the fretboard, put a bit of lemon oil on it. So that's why it's probably looking a bit cleaner. Okay, so I've tuned it up. It's probably out of tune now because it's stretching. You can probably hear a little bit of buzzing up there. But when I hold the guitar and play it, it doesn't buzz. So that's the A string. When I hold it and play it, it doesn't buzz. When I lie it down and play it, it buzzes. That's why you should always check your tunings and your string heights when you're in a playing position, because in this position here, gravity is pulling down on the string, and when I'm holding it, it's pulling this way on the string. That said, I'm not sure if it is actually gravity that does that. It could just be the way the string vibrates, because there's a lot of stuff going on here that I don't technically understand. But anyway, it doesn't buzz when I'm standing there and playing it. Nothing buzzes. This D string could go a tad lower, but my experience has been when doing this to guitars, if you lower it, the D string is the one that, well, the A string and D string are the ones that seem to vibrate the most, and you've got to kind of leave them with a little bit more room than the other strings. So I'm going to just go with this. I'm going to sand this now. I'll loosen the strings, sand this off, make it look nice, sand these down, and then we'll glue it in place. I'm going to glue that in. Now you only need a spot of glue. I'm using Glue Boost. This is quite thin, this one, so I could use a bit more on this one, but I'm not going to. All I'm going to do is put, that's plenty. In fact, that's too much. It's very thin, this stuff, it moves very quickly. So I'll just make sure I've got it firmly seated. Make sure the strings aren't in the way and it's in the center, and it is. And it's up hard up against the fretboard because that's obviously our intonation point. So I'm just holding it in there quite tight. I'm pretty sure that glue's set already. Making sure we're in the right spot, because if we're not, I'll have to whack it out and do it again. Alright, so I've used more glue than I wanted to. I only want to use a drop, but this was very thin glue, so it just kind of ran. And most of that would have actually gone into this timber, which was a bit porous. So that'll be plenty. I usually use a thicker glue, and then I would just use, basically just put a dot in the middle, and that's it. All the glue is doing is stopping this from shifting from side to side. The strings themselves actually hold the nut down. You could actually play quite comfortably without any glue at all, just having the nut sitting there. The only problem is that, you know, when you go to change strings, it'll fall off and you'll lose it. Or as you're tightening strings, you know, if you tighten this side first, it might pull it across. So you just put a dab of glue, that's all it's there for. Okay, so I glued the nut in place and I just put a little bit of boiled linseed oil on it. Just put that away now. Just to, as I said, get rid of all those the powder marks from the sanding, make it look a bit nicer. And I wanted to make sure the glue was on before I did that, because the linseed oil takes, you know, a day, about 24 hours to cure. Well, the first coat doesn't. The first coat probably cure in about 6 hours. But I wanted to make sure that the glue was in place first, otherwise it wouldn't stick. It's tuned up relatively. Here's an E, a G. It might still move, the strings are new. F chord is pretty easy to play. So it's pretty good. C, sounds pretty nice. G. E. So going open strings, you get a tiny bit of buzzing on the E, on the second oscillation. A, D, G, B, E. And the strings are super low, like you only have to touch at the first fret. The only exception is the D, which is slightly higher. All the others are just touch. The D's a little higher, but I don't want to lower it because I've had problems with D strings in the past where it's really easy to go too low on a D. That seems to need a bit more room, that string, for me anyway. But I'm really happy with that. That's for a beginner. This should be a lot easier to learn on than it was. So anyway, there's the nut in place. If you're wondering how it looks with the guitar, it's sort of it looks alright. I don't think it's too out of place. It used to be white like the saddle is. Oh, well, you can see. Yeah, it was kind of imitation bone colour. I hope you found the video helpful, and if you did, consider helping me out by giving it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos of this ilk, consider subscribing to Cheapskate, and have a great day. Job done.